This is the last week of this, and talking to Matt and told him it's been a long time since we've done a letter, one of Paul's letters, so this is kind of I thought it was a unique lesson, a unique series, I guess is the word for it. But we're going to go through and review, what's that? Ephesians chapter 1, yeah, we're going to go through the whole thing. I asked him last week and this week twice, I said, hey, remind me of the verses that you used. Because I told him about 3 weeks ago, I said, I'm a little confused. You keep saying these words, sit, walk, stand, is what Ephesians breaks down into. I said, I'm not seeing it. I don't understand. It's like you're not referencing it enough, or what's the story here? And so he said, okay, I'll work on that a little bit. But I went back and I asked him, give me the layout for the different verses that correspond to this. So today's going to be a little bit different. Obviously, it's different because we've got a small little group here, but maybe that'll be all for the better. We're going to sing something at the end, so we're just going to get right into it. So Ephesians chapter 1, I want to recap these three sections that he did, these three themes: sit, walk, stand. So if you skip ahead, Shauna, to the first verse, I think it's 4 slides. Sit, walk, stand, right there. Ephesians 1, this is one of the verses that he said stood out to him. So somebody read this for me, please, for the group. Verse 16. Extra Bibles, get your phones out. What you got? Verse 16, Rustin.
I do not cease to give thanks for you, remembering you in my prayer.
How many times have you heard Matt try to confront us or remind us about the idea of an attitude of what? Gratitude, right. And then he said to us, there are people that every conversation you get into, it's negativity. Do you work with anybody like that? Because I certainly do. Yeah, so much so. What'd you say, Kevin? You are that person. Why? You're not that way around us. There's, correct me if I'm wrong, John, there's so much negativity at your job place, they pay you extra to come in early, right? And scribble on the big old warehouse floor with chalk. Anything positive, encouraging, maybe scripture, sunburst, anything that says, have a good day and enjoy this place and be positive. That's crazy. So I start out with that because if your feet hit the floor in the morning and everything is just negative from jump, I mean, what a miserable life to lead. So it's a pretty simple lesson, but the first thing is just have an attitude where, man, it's God, I'm grateful, whether it's the sunrise or the clouds. Like, just find the silver lining in those things. So first one's attitude. Now, Rustin, keep going, 17, 18.
That the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of glory, may give you the spirit of wisdom and the revelation and the knowledge of Him.
17 says, a spirit of wisdom and revelation. And 18, the eyes of your hearts have been enlightened, which means, opened and revealed. And also, you have a hope. I put this, the second one up here is perspective. I'll tell you a story. I was in the jail this week talking to a guy. And I said to him, he was on the other side of the bars. So I was asking him, what happened? What does it look like when you go to court for your bond hearing? What your wife and your parents, you've talked to your family and all that kind of stuff. And the whole thing, it was gloomy, and it was basically just screw it. And obviously he didn't use those words, but that was his attitude about everything. Like the whole scenario. There's people, that's fine, don't apologize for her. There's people in jail that are smiling and that life is good. There's people in this room that life is good, and there's people in that you meet in life and in those workplaces, that are just it's just negative, everything. And not just negative because they're not grateful, but negative perspective. You have a negative outlook on everything. And when I read these words right here, I think something will come to mind for you guys. Verse 17, that you have wisdom and that God has shown you things, a revelation of knowledge. Verse 18, that your heart has been enlightened and that you have a hope. I feel like it's just different when you talk to some people and they can converse with you about their perspective on life. Yes? And other people are just the weather sucks, my life sucks, I can't believe I got arrested for this, and the judge is going to stick me with this and all that stuff. I mean, it was a miserable conversation I had. So I tried to ask him, have you thought about it this way? Maybe when all this is said and done, you think God might be trying to show you such and such. And I was trying, I was asking him different things, and I'm telling you, it was F this and F that, the whole thing. It was pretty rough. Maybe now that he's out, actually he got out, maybe a couple days later he's had a change of perspective. Because obviously behind bars is a different perspective than going home and trying to get his life back in order this week. I don't mean to be too extreme because that's a little bit judgmental, right? I was on the other side of the bars. But you know what I'm saying? There's a perspective on life that it can be pretty limited if you haven't asked God to show you and reveal to you some things that you've been through.
Well, just maybe that's all he's ever known.
Yes, absolutely.
So his whole world
Mm-hmm.
is like that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's survival.
And that's why I was trying to ask him a few things, and I'm not trying to say it was like I wasn't expecting a light switch to go off, but you sit there for an hour and you're hitting a brick wall. And so I left, but I had somebody else go talk to him, and we're going to find out in a few days just what that is. Again, I'm not expecting a miracle, but I'm also just want to encourage you. The perspective that you have, the reason that you're here is this point, right?
Why not expect a miracle?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, if you sow the seed,
Yeah,
you might think you might have hit hard ground, but there's somebody else you don't know who you're going to meet up with. Or you might have just thought that's a menial task what you did, but it wasn't.
No, I know it wasn't.
It could have been a divine appointment, you know what I'm saying, right?
Yes,
Could. I'm just saying.
I hope it was.
You spoke about our perspective.
Sometimes even the little things that you say can make a difference. It doesn't seem like it does. I mean,
Absolutely.
when I first got to the mission, they made me sign a statement of faith. I didn't believe in it. Crap, right? But you got to sign it to get fed, right? So I signed it, right? And they kept pounding me with crack, pounding me with crack, pounding me with crack. And then this one pastor there, I said, "Oh, believe in crack." He said, "Yeah, or just maybe you should, because we're talking about prayer, maybe you should just pray for relief." And and it just went over my head at the time, and didn't pay no attention to it. But later on, it stopped. As I got involved in other things, it stopped. And so some of the silly things that you said, you don't think you're hitting a brick wall.
Mm-hmm.
Something may stick
Mm-hmm.
and come out later, but could change his life.
Yeah, I agree. And that leads to this next one. Look at chapter 2. Somebody read verse 10, please. Chapter 2, verse 10. Verse 10, kind of loud over the train.
To be good in effect when the times reach their fulfillment, to bring only to all things in heaven and on earth under Christ.
That was chapter 1. Go to chapter 2.
For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things He planned for us long ago.
Uh-huh. The good things that He has planned for us. The other version says works or your actions and whatnot. Let me read brutal. What? Purpose. Let me read this. That's your whole life.
Yeah? But that's why
This is the other definitions for the phrase good works, okay? Think about this. Think about your life. Think about your purpose, including your perspective. This is the definition for the phrase good works. Useful, pleasant, agreeable, joyful, happy, excellent, distinguished, upright, and honorable. Anything that can be accomplished by your hand, art, industry, mechanical, or your mind? Years back, Matt taught the idea of the Great Commission in Matthew that says, go and make disciples. And for years, I had heard when you hear the phrase, you're supposed to go out and make disciples, that somehow you were supposed to be a full-time pastor missionary and you're supposed to go to other countries and all that kind of stuff. And I can remember specific sermons about that. But when he gave us the phrase, in your going, it's an ing, that means that anything that you do, any job that you have, any role that you have in life, any of that kind of stuff can be used as good works for God's purposes. And that goes into the whole thing. Any job that you find yourself in, any school, any classroom that you have yourself in, absolutely any task. Let me read that again. Anything that can be accomplished by your hand, by art, industry, or your mind. Any of that kind of stuff can be used for God's works. Does that help you with perspective? Does it help you with purpose and finding your purpose? I was thinking about you three people. You, Rustin, just had a little bit of a career change in the last couple of years. Well, not a little bit, big career change in the last couple of years. And then I had texted him and Jennifer and Nate this week. Jennifer has asked herself a few times, am I really happy in this workplace? It's a lot of stress in this workplace. You guys ask these questions sometimes, right? Are we happy here? Should I interview with somebody else? Should I get a change of venue? Should I move to another state? And then Nate and Justin right here in Everly, you guys are all asking questions right now, or have been asking questions. What am I doing as the high school chapter closes? What am I doing with my summers? What am I doing with my job? And where am I going from here? Am I moving out? Am I staying home? Am I going to this school, that school? Am I working? All those kinds of questions. And all of it doesn't matter what the answer is. I'm convinced of this. It does not matter what the answer is, because all of it, everything that we find ourselves doing, falls in this category of they can be good works that God can use no matter where you find yourself. All right, so got a picture for you. As a rose bush in front of our house. I pass this particular rose bush every single day between my front door and my vehicle before I leave. Obviously, the color right there, the vibrancy, the bloom, it's always beautiful when there's blooms on the rose bush. I took a picture of this side because the green is normal. The purple is the new growth. And every time I prune it back and I cut all the dead blossoms off and all that kind of stuff, you see purple. And it always reminds me that it's a different color when it's coming up new and it's new growth. And sometimes that's not comfortable when we go through that, right? But this is what I pass on my way out to work or to wherever every single morning. All right, next picture. On the other side of our front door, there's a rose bush. When I go out my front door, there's a rose bush on my left on my way to my car. On the right side of the flower bed, there's another rose bush. I would never really see it. We have a bench right there. I would never see that rose bush unless I came out and I sat on the bench and looked at it. Otherwise, I never noticed it. And it's been there almost as long as we've been in the house. So we had the flower bed had one on both ends. Some time ago, this thing dried out. And I remember I was cutting the grass one day and I saw it and I pushed on a branch and it was so brittle the branch snapped off. And I pushed on another one and it broke. And it wasn't a few weeks later that I pushed. I didn't even have to get a shovel. I just pushed and I grabbed that root and the whole root ball came out. And that was the end of that plant. The whole thing was so dry. I picked it up, went to throw it away and said, oh, this is worthy of a picture before I put it in the trash can and its history. So 2 different ends of our flower bed. There's a rose bush on each end. One of them, this. One of them, beautiful. I guess I show you that to show you 2 opposite extremes and to sort of pose the question to you, where do you find yourself in life some days? Dried out, brittle, pretty crusty? Sometimes it happens. The other side, you got blossoms that come up different times of the year. You have new growth that happens because the chapters happen in your life where you go from green to purple as you're growing and changing, but you can be a joy to people with a sweet aroma and whatnot. Do you remember, as for reviewing today, do you remember a few weeks back, Matt flat out asked us, what do you smell like? You don't remember that because you weren't here. I remember it. He asked us, what do you bring into a room when you come into a room? What do you bring into the workplace? Do you bring in encouragement? Do you scribble a positive message on the sidewalk to say, have joy, everybody? Or is it, man, negativity, complaining? I get this at my house. Shauna and the girls have told me, you can be grumpy, you can be negative, you can be very judgmental, and it's not a very sweet aroma to be around, and you affect the mood here. And he kept asking, remember Matt kept asking us that day, what do you bring to your house? How do you affect the mood in your home and in your workplace? So this is what I want to do. There's a paper back there that says the word sit on it. Over the last couple of minutes as I've been talking, the big themes that Matt talked about from sit was when you sit with God, when you stew on life, what are the themes that come up? Well, I want you to go write it down. I want you to write that word down. If you have something to write down about your attitude or things that you're grateful for, attitude of gratitude, if you want to write something you're grateful for on that, if you want to write down something that how God has changed your perspective because you've had a life-altering thing and life, your lenses have changed in the last couple of years. Or if you want to write down something about purpose and about God has given you this, or you are asking and you still have a prayer, write something on there. The paper is white, the paint is gray, a little bit dull. So write on there in the different colors something that God has shown you or something that He has spoken to you or a way that you have figured out how to worship Him through this idea of stewing and sitting with Him. All right? Shauna's going to play a song, so we got a couple minutes to think about it. No pressure, not everybody has to go at once, but let's add some color to that page, please. All right, Ephesians 4. Ephesians 4, verse 1. Somebody read verse 1, please.
I, therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called.
Walk in a manner worthy. The word Cubo. Here's a phrase I'm going to teach you. Because, and I meant to put a Y in there, worthy. It is hard sometimes, in my opinion, to establish appropriate behavior. For example, Annalisa just apologized for her baby making a noise, right? She looked at me and she said, I'm so sorry. Is that necessary? I think everybody else in this room would, on one hand, think, no, don't worry about it. She's precious. Of course, we're glad to hear that noise. And then on the other hand, is it a distraction and whatnot? So it's like we're asking ourselves, is it appropriate behavior to do that? And you could use that example in so many ways. It's hard to define sometimes what is walking in a worthy manner, what that looks like. Cubo, that stands for conduct unbecoming of an officer. We have an argument at work right now going on, and literally I mean this. We've consulted our staff lawyer to define when you find out that another officer is doing something, at what point does their behavior constitute reporting them? So the example is, if you abuse somebody, if you smack your wife, if you do a crime, it obviously has to be reported. But off duty, if you're drinking a little too much, what's the word too much mean? How do you define that? If you're gambling a little too much, how do you define that? If you've cheated on your wife, how do you define? At what point does the questionable behavior become a problem? And when does it become conduct unbecoming? That phrase, you see that phrase in policy manuals and the International Association of Chiefs of Police. That's who a lot of us have to form our policies after, and this phrase is in there. But it's hard to determine at what point is your conduct or is your walk not really good enough. That's a tough thing. A tough thing to define and a tough thing to measure. Verse 17. Somebody read 17, please. For 17.
Now this I say and testify in the Lord that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do in the futility of their minds.
Yep. Futility of their minds. Does anybody have a different word in your translation for futility? Just to read it. Zoom.
One says, their minds are full of darkness.
Darkness, devoid of truth and appropriateness, perverse, full of depravity, vanity, and here's another one, transientness. The only time I ever heard of the word transient is what? Yeah, you were transient for a while. Yeah, homeless people. Lost, purposeless. Well, you got a purpose. You're just trying to find maybe food or whatever, or some housing or something like that. But when you are transient, you are lacking structure. You're lacking community a lot of times. And now that's a word I've never heard before, transientness.
Version of God's word, it says that their minds are set on worthless things.
Worthless things, right. And verse 23, a few verses later, says that you need to be renewed in the spirit of your minds. This reminded me of Romans 12, 1 and 2. And I heard that quoted this week by, of all people, Dave Ramsey. He used that in a quote to say he was hoping, and part of their whole mission in their group is people would be transformed mentally on the topics of finances. Don't behave like the rest of the world. That's his tagline. You've heard this, right? Don't live like everybody else so that you can live like everybody else. That's his phrase. He referenced that phrase, renewing of your minds. And so verse 23 uses that as well, renewing of your minds, because verse 17, the phrase futility of their minds is only in the Bible 3 times. It's only in the New Testament 3 times. And the only example I could think of, and I put this picture in here, not the only example, but it's kind of a regret that I have, is futility of their minds. You want to say 5:8? Is that the next slide, Shauna? What's the next slide? Renewed, yes. 5:8. Chapter 5, verse 8 says, at one time you were in darkness, but you're also the light of the world. Walk as children of light. I'm trying to paint a picture, or trying to get you to stew on the idea of what is walking in a manner worthy. And if you walk as an example to other people, a brightness and encouragement, all the things that we talked about a few minutes ago with that, then you're going to come across as a person of light and not darkness. When we said you're enlightened, there's a whole different perspective and mindset that you have when you live that way versus the behavior of the other way and walk in darkness. What's the next slide? Chapter 6, verse 6. Verse 5 says, obey your masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart, as you would obey Christ. Verse 6, but not by the way of eye service as people pleasers. If you look that word up in Greek, that's the word, ophthalmoulia. And the definition of that is when you are bound to the eye only. Verse 5 said that you had a sincere heart, but verse 6 says not just being a people pleaser. It means bound to the eyes only. In other words, you're all visual and you have absolutely no depth. You have nothing inside of you. You are empty. You are core. You're an actor. If it's just for eye service, you're just putting on an act. As you grow older, this little baby back here doesn't know what it's like, but when you get to become kids and teenagers and then adults, you realize what it's like when you're just doing things for the sake of other people versus doing them for yourself. That's integrity, right? When someone's watching you, you do something because someone else is grading evaluating your actions, versus when you are living that life at your core because you know that's the right thing to do. Next picture or next... Okay, I put this picture up here. This is a straight-up picture Google image from my elementary school. Wanamaker Elementary, Indianapolis, Indiana, Southeastern Avenue. I remember being in 5th grade, sitting at lunch, and I said something and I used curse words, and someone said, "Don't you go to church?" And the kid sitting next to him said, "Yeah, and his dad's the pastor too." And I regret that moment to this day. Because it was those little early moments in life when you don't think your actions matter and you're kind of trying to be a rebel and you're trying to fit in with other people. And someone's asking you, like, why do you act like that? And nowadays, I hang out with a bunch of people and the vocabulary is that and more. And I have an opportunity every day to join in the joking and the coarseness and the ridiculous humor, or to kind of step back from the 4th graders is what I feel like they kind of act like sometimes and say, I'm not going to act like that. And actually, I'm going to ask you, why do you say that about that person? Or why do you, whatever. The question is, are you walking in a manner worthy of the calling that God's reminded you of, or poked you about, or convicted you about? What's your walk look like? I'm going to take this paper off here and ask all of you to come back here while another song plays and the poster says walk. The question is, has God prompted you? Has God convicted you? Has He painted a picture for you? Has He encouraged you some way in your walk? And what do you want to write on this time? I think we've all had moments where we've had either someone encourage us, someone challenge us, God's spoken to us through how we are walking and how we are changing our behavior. Write something on the paper this time. Again, plain paper, gray paint, pretty boring. But the colorful notations on here is going to show how God has grown us and added fruit and color to our lives by how He's challenged us in our walk. All right, chapter 6, Ephesians 6. Last section here. Verse 13 starts a whole paragraph that's a pretty good one. Somebody want to read this nice and loud? So chapter 6, verse 10 through 20, I guess, the whole thing. Nice and loud and confident.
I can't keep focused that long, so somebody else can do it.
It says, a final word, be strong in the Lord and His mighty power. Put on all God's armor so that you will be able to stand firm against all strategies of the devil. For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. Therefore, put on every piece of God's armor so you will be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. Then after the battle, you will still be standing firm. Stand your ground, putting on the belt of truth and the body of armor of God's righteousness. For shoes, put on the peace that comes from good use so that you will be fully prepared. In addition to all of these, hold up the shield of faith to stop the fiery arrows of the devil. Put on salvation as your helmet and take the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. Pray in the Spirit at all times and on every occasion. Stay alert and be persistent in your prayer for all believers everywhere. And pray for me, too. Ask God to give me the right words so I can boldly explain God's mysterious plan that the good news is for Jews and Gentiles alike. I am in chains now, still preaching this message as God's ambassador. So pray that I will keep on speaking boldly for Him, as I should.
That's an awesome paragraph, and we could stay in this for a while. The armor is an incredible picture. Verse 13 says, take up the full armor so that you may be able to withstand on the evil day. And after everything, right, having done all, the dust is settled, to stand firm. The word is histemi in Greek. It means to stand in the presence of a judge. Stand in front of others that are in your midst. Stand in front of the Sanhedrin. Stand in order to keep your place. Stand prepared. Stand unharmed. Stand with a steadfast mind. Stand safe and sound. Stand with quality. Stand as one who does not hesitate, and stand as one who does not waver. The picture from this week that I wanted to put up here without putting actual destruction of people's houses and sheds and trees and whatnot is this, because over the last 2 weeks, this has been a lot of worry on our mind for Francine and then for Helena just 2 days ago. When we took the guys' retreat on June 1st up to Mississippi, I remember, and I talked Sunday morning, some of you guys heard this, all of the trees, Louisiana, Mississippi, the majority of the trees, besides our big oaks down here, Mississippi is known for its pine trees. And y'all know pine trees grow quickly. They also burn quickly. And they're not as strong in the wind. But when we went over to Georgia and we were hiking in May, which was like 2 weeks before that, we saw a lot of tall oak trees. Oak trees are known for being a hardwood, make furniture out of them. They're a lot stronger than pine. And I told you guys as men, right, the idea of we got to be strong and whatnot and stand firm. And Matt came to me later and he said, yeah, but pine trees do better. They sway better in the wind. And so there actually is a benefit to them. And I can remember as a kid going out to California, seeing the redwoods. The redwoods are known for being, hundreds of feet tall and hundreds of years old. The thing is, their root systems don't necessarily go very deep. Y'all know this? They don't go crazy deep like when we drive pilings here, right? They grow out because they'll grab onto each other. So they're strong in a different reason and a different method than a pine tree that does have some flex. When buildings are going to withstand an earthquake, they have to have flex to them. Things are going to come at us in this life, right? We have to have flex. We have to have flexibility. And Matt was trying to tell me, man, when a storm comes or when life throws crap at you, we have to be flexible. But as this verse says, it also kind of paints that picture of the oak tree. We do have to be strong. And that verse, it says, after everything has been thrown at you, can you still stand? And when it said, can you stand before a judge? You guys have seen, some of you had done this, and some of you have sat by family members that have literally gone, because you told this story with tears in your eyes, literally gone over to that courthouse over there and stood before a judge to hear what he or she has to say. And Kevin, you've stood there and you've had people plead their case before you as a judge, and you have to look at them and say, man, I might stick them with a big old fine or with you have to pay your rent or this back pay. Like, there's a lot that can be said from a judge. Can the person still stand? Can they face that rendering, that decision, and can they face the consequences? But those other words that I said, I'm not just talking about a hurricane, obviously. You guys have been through some crap in your life and you have come back from a lot. I'm asking you, what picture comes to mind when you stand unharmed? When you stand with a steadfast mind? After the things that you've gone through, have you stood safe and sound? When it's easier to give up and to quit and take the easy way out, have you stood with quality? And when you have an option to say whatever you want or to blow off some steam, fly off the handle, are you one who does not hesitate or waver? Can you stand before a judge? Can you stand before the Sanhedrin? Can you keep your place? Maybe this is the most important one. Can you stand with others in your midst?
I don't know if you can rank these three, but that one seems to be the toughest.
The midst?
The standing.
Oh, these three? Well, remember what we talked about. It's one thing to sit with God and get your strength from Him and to ask Him to fill your cup. It's one thing to walk and live this out. But I agree, Lindley, it's another thing to stand your ground when the winds and the storms, right, are blowing really hard. All right, we'll pick up the walk banner. We got one more on there. So come back here and write something on the poster that says stand. And if you want to get honest or vulnerable and write a storm that you've been through when your life looked like that and the way that God strengthened you or gave you other redwood trees next to you to lean on, maybe that's what you want to write. If you want to put a verse that God has given you to encourage you to stand, strengthen you, write that. Write whatever you want to put about the idea that you can stand firm in this life. All right, let's wrap this up. Sit, walk, stand. You guys know what I've said before about this whole thing with Ephesians, and they asking the question of like, hey, Matt went for a couple of weeks talking about certain passages and certain chapters, and then why do we have this week where we just kind of like review? And it's that reminder over and over, like what is the point of going to just attend church if we don't stop for a second and ask ourselves, have we taken anything away from it? Has God shown us anything? And I hope that the stuff that we wrote on the board, like I said, added some color figuratively, but also literally from Him to just what could be this life, which is boring and gray and whatnot. 2 comments I want to make about church. We had a really good conversation on Wednesday night at Corey and Heather's house. And that was Kevin and Shauna and I. It was, and I told Rustin the next day, that video that we watched from that series that we're all doing, the Ray Vanderlaan series, man, it was it was a really cool thing about Scripture I didn't know, but then the conversation we had was just really good. And it's 5 people coming from kind of different perspectives. We have different knowledge of the Bible, we have different life experiences, but we all had a chance to share a little bit. That is a fantastic picture of what it really does mean to walk with people. It's not like it is in here where pretty much one person talks most of the time. And we're all sitting on couches sharing with each other in someone's home, maybe some food, maybe some wine, and conversation. We're all more so on the same page. And I thought it was great. And it's only the 2nd or 3rd week, so it's building. I hope that if you're not in one of those groups yet, I hope you do it. Alex, I know, is going to start one in October, so we kind of did an abbreviated start as they were getting used to a newborn. But let me add something to that comment about the intimacy that you can have with people in home versus this. I told you several weeks ago, probably the last time I was up here, that a friend of mine out of state was arrested. And I was talking about labels. And the label that he was going to have was convicted felon. And I was just texting him and asking, not him, I couldn't text him. I was asking, are you going to go ahead and plead to avoid the trial? Just get it over with? So I texted his wife, and Sean is on this text. And I said, hey, by the way, have you guys been to church? Are your friends, because she had told me her friends were sticking by her through this whole process and all that stuff. And the problem was that when he first got arrested, the detectives did some digging and they found some other stuff, and so they put more charges. So she said, we had started going to church pretty consistently until the 2nd set of charges. I haven't been back since. I've watched online, but I'm still going to my Bible study small group, and the kids are still going to their small group on Wednesday night. I say that not for the shock value of what it would be like to be arrested and your life turned upside down. I say it because there is something embarrassing or traditional about coming to your weekend, Saturday, Sunday morning thing. But there's a whole different ball game for the trust, the vulnerability, the relatability and that intimacy that comes when you can do whatever those conversations, those comments, you can do those in a smaller setting. There's something powerful about that. So I hope, and my prayer is that we don't flush the sermons that Matt works hard to present in here, the verses and the context and the culture that he teaches, has taught us. But I also hope this week, I thank you for doing this. I hope this week was a chance to say, God, thank you for what you've done in our lives and shown us through Scripture in Paul's letter. We're going to take, like Abby said, we're going to take the next several weeks, pretty much all of October, to do the high holidays. Part of the meaning of them is reflection. I hope that even though some people criticize and say why do you guys celebrate those holidays? They're weird and whatnot. There's been some very, very rich conversations and experiences through them in years past. And I hope that every year, I hope this year is another example that you grow a little bit more and we learn a little bit more about God's character and what He's done in each of us through this set of holidays in 2024.